Welcome to Shenanigans Ensue with
Mary SanGiovanni!
Hi folks, welcome to Cosmic Shenanigans. I'm Mary SanGiovanni, and we are up to shenanigans, as always, of cosmic proportions. Today, we'll be discussing the movie Await Further Instructions. Now, this is a movie I found flipping through Netflix. I had no idea that it was cosmic horror until I watched it, and I actually kind of rather enjoyed it. It's the kind of thing where I think you have to watch it 2 or 3 times to get all the little subtleties that the filmmakers put in the background and in the dialogue and, you know, in the camera angles and things like that. But it's definitely worth checking out. It stars Sam Gittins, Graham Masters, Neerja Nayak, Abigail Cruttenden, the endearingly incorrigible David Bradley from Game of Thrones fame, Holly Weston, and Chris Sadler. It was released April 4th, 2019 in Germany and is directed by Johnny Kevorkian. Now, this episode contains spoilers, so go and watch it first, and then come back and we'll talk about it. Okay, so you're back now? Well, here's what I like about this movie and why I think it's cosmic horror. It's something I've noticed is happening a lot in great horror movies in general lately. It's basically a lot of things where these movies are switching up, combining, and blending subgenres, so that the movie starts out as one thing, and then sometimes it sort of melds into something else, a different kind of horror movie, and then it melds again into a different kind of horror movie. If you look at Hereditary, that was a kind of movie that did that, you know, where you get a little bit more than just a straightforward, straight up, you know, subgenre trope type of movie. Now, Await Further Instructions starts off as a siege movie. Then it flows seamlessly into a paranoia tale, which involves theories about terrorism, government conspiracy, and psychological experiments, and it ultimately culminates in cosmic horror. It's a British horror movie, and one of the things I've been trying to do more lately is explore some cosmic horror as developed and influenced by other cultures, European cultures, Asian cultures, just different approaches to cosmic horror, because at the root of cosmic horror, culture plays an important part. And for many cultures who are taught that you are essentially a cog in a wheel, let's say, or that your role is to be subservient to someone else, even if cultural norms are changing, if traditionally your culture has taught you that, then it provides a sort of interesting underlayer to cosmic horror from that culture. Okay, now this is a very proper British family. It's Christmas time, and honestly, it's the paranoia aspect, I think, which holds together these other 2 genres that and ultimately provides the source of real horror. Because as we've discussed in the past, cosmic horror used to be about the great reveal. With Lovecraft, it was the great reveal of these vast entities, these forces beyond our world of understanding, that, whether malevolently or indifferently, served to facilitate the destruction of humanity. And the salient point, I think, in this film is that paranoia, that there is something beyond our capability of understanding. There is something beyond our control. And ultimately, there is a force, regardless of whether it's terrorists or the government or aliens or however you want to look at it, throughout the paranoia segment of this, that is undermining the free will of the characters. There is a suggestion that, because what essentially happens is this house becomes surrounded by a black, it looks almost like kelp to me, or bundles of wires, surrounding this entire house, and they can't get out. They don't know what it is, and their television provides them instructions on what to do. Very brief instructions, like your food is contaminated, throw it away. Or stay indoors, await further instructions, hence the title of the movie. And they are not aware of who is giving them these instructions. They're not aware of what is happening in the outside world that has caused the situation to happen. And what we're watching is how this culture reacts to, being good citizens, basically, and following instructions which are predicated on the idea that they're being given for the safety of all involved. As I mentioned, there's sort of a suggestion that their thoughts are being influenced somehow, that their reactions are not 100% their own, that they're maybe being something maybe being pumped into the air of the house that is affecting their judgment. And then you get a lot of, I think, in the subtle moments of facial expression or the dialogue or just the family dynamic, you get a sense of why maybe they react the way they do, even if those reactions are so completely different than what you might think normal people, how they might react in this situation. Again, because this is cosmic horror, I think that speaks to this idea of authority and our place in the world, our position in the universe, and our importance as an individual as opposed to the traditional Lovecraftian cosmic horror notion that one human life, all human life is insignificant, but particularly one human life is especially insignificant. It's a drop of water in a bucket. So let's look at how some of these things evolve throughout the movie over time. The two conflicting images of authority that we have, the television in the living room and the cross that hangs right above it. Now, I'm going to try to say this without offense to anybody who finds solace, comfort, or strength in organized religion. But there is the potential connotation of the cross as a symbol of organized religion that suggests a certain willingness to defer to a higher power, a greater authority, to be subservient to and put one's fate in the hands of someone else, some other greater thing. Two of the characters, I believe, are ex-military. And again, the military has my utmost respect and gratitude, but of the negative connotations associated with any kind of law or military enforcement, it is that the training teaches you that you are part of a whole, that you are not an individual, that you are not supposed to think you are supposed to follow orders, etc. And I think that the director is using these connotations of these things to suggest a group of people who are already predisposed to give up their autonomy, who are already predisposed to believe that their individuality doesn't matter. And that's a very cosmic horror idea. One of the characters mentions, it's not about me, I'm not special, I'm a team player, I'm not the problem. And again, there's a lot of, one of the characters is an office manager. And we are led to believe, based on the dialogue, that his job is very much doing what he's told, and then sort of funneling those orders into people who have to do what they're told. All right, so we have a lot of that kind of thing going on, this sort of loss of autonomy and thinking for oneself. There's a skewing of symbolism and religion to create something grotesque and fanatical, okay? Which is where I think in a lot of horror, post-apocalyptic horror, cosmic horror, a lot of horror in general shows fanatical religious or military or even individual people as somewhat skewing the symbolism that guided the very best parts of these things, the tenets that make these things good, and that they've become something warped. Okay, we have another cosmic horror element in this movie, is messages through dreams. Now it's very subtle, but it starts off with the mother. Her name is Beth, of this somewhat extended family, and when this substance first surrounds the house, she comes downstairs and asks her son Nick, who is one of the main characters, what is going on here? I had a horrible nightmare about banging sounds. Now, these sounds, we come to realize by the end of the movie, are probably coming from the neighbors' houses because they're trying to get out too. But there's something sort of prophetic about it, because in several of the scenes directly following this, we see them banging on this substance trying to get out. They try to hit it with an axe. They try to, peel it apart. They try to punch through it or knock through it or kick through it, and they cannot get through it. We have Nick, again, the son, the main character, who's come home after many years of being away, because as I mentioned, the family dynamic here is not warm and fuzzy. And he has a couple of dreams in this movie. The first dream quickly becomes a prophetic nightmare about what's to come. He dreams about his pregnant sister's, complications with the pregnancy. He dreams about the nightmare that his mother had, the banging on the banging sounds coming from around the neighborhood, the substance itself. It's a series of very fluttery images in which it's just that sort of feeling that you get when you first wake up from a nightmare, before it kicks into your logical brain that it was just a dream. That sort of panicky, icky feeling. That's what the series of images sort of, I guess, it sort of inspires that kind of feeling when you're watching it. And, and he jerks awake. He has another dream. And this dream is about freedom and beauty and life. He's in this beautiful field in the sunshine with his girlfriend, and that quickly takes a bad turn. But it's this idea that he's dreaming, perhaps for the last time, about the outside world and what is good about humanity, what is good about Earth, before it's just swallowed up. Now, the very, very strong element of cosmic horror is the occult. Now, we've discussed in prior episodes that not all cosmic horror uses the occult or uses cults, either way, at all. Sometimes it's only briefly mentioned. Sometimes it's only vaguely suggested. What I think is interesting about the use of it in this movie, the one attempt that characters make to shut the television off, that is giving them instructions, causes the father character to panic. And when he turns the television on, it's almost like it's rebooting somehow. And what you see is a series of flashing, blinking images of occult symbols. Clearly occult symbols. Before the television resolves itself and then gives them, a warning message that, breaking contact could lead to, risk of life. It's a threat. But prior to that, you see this just brief flickering of occult symbols. And what I think is interesting about that is more that the force behind the messages may or may not be connected to an occult source. Like, whatever brought this force on, it might have been related to the occult, and maybe that's why those symbols show up. What I gathered the first time I watched the movie, and then maybe more so the second time, was that these symbols were actually meant to subconsciously undermine the security of the people seeing them. Because even if you are not familiar with the occult, even if you are not, a practitioner in any way of esoteric and archaic symbols, you know those symbols when you see them. You may not know what they mean, but you know that they mean something that is forbidden to you, something that is potentially dangerous. I don't know that you could have grown up, at least in American and obviously British society, and not be aware that those symbols mean something potentially hazardous on a, if not a physical, then a spiritual and emotional and mental level. And I think that the reason that this force uses those symbols is to get through them in an almost subconscious way, to scare them. And we're going to come back to that as to why it would be important to scare these people. We have pregnancy, okay? At least a lot of Lovecraftian horror, and some cosmic horror, following that. And definitely even some cosmic horror prior to that, although I think pregnancy, there's more autonomy there, is the sense that the pregnant woman is a vessel of some sort, that she is carrying life which may or may not be related to the destruction or the saving of America, or of the world in general. In this particular case, Nick's sister is pregnant, and she's not terribly bright, which to me sort of harkens back to some of the other vessels used in Lovecraftian stories, where like it's almost as if she was duped into this situation. She's not. She's pregnant. She's very pregnant, almost ready to give birth. I think they said she had like 2 or 3 weeks left. And what I find interesting here again is that in a lot of cosmic horror, this entity, this child entity, would signal the melding of human and alien physicality. That these women are essentially doorways to another new world, another evolution of humanity, or what comes beyond humanity. And I think that in this particular movie, that same message comes through, but not quite the same way. And it really has to do with the, I think, innovative thing that they do with the entity itself, and how that entity feels about humanity. That we see that this baby is indeed the last real hope for humanity, as probably babies across the world are. But that last hope for humanity, if the entity itself can't make grown, autonomous people who think for them, generally, even people who thinking for themselves is not comfortable, if even they can't be swayed to fall under the power of this particular entity, that maybe they can be trained from babies, if from the very beginning they are given these messages. Okay? There is again a sense that this entity knows everything about these people. It knows what the parents were going to name this baby, if it was a boy or a girl. It knows stuff about them. It knows their fears. It knows their paranoia. So then we come back to the entity itself. As I mentioned, for most of this movie, you are led to believe that it is a siege/paranoia movie about the things that people do when the breakdown of autonomous thought happens, when the breakdown of freedom happens, and how people tend to group together in certain camps, how quickly trust evaporates between people, how easily even family can turn on each other. And I had conversations recently with people, and it led to some thought about what the nature of family really is, and what the nature of the family dynamic is. I'm pretty close to my family, but not everyone is. And so family does not mean the same thing to everybody. In this particular movie, this family is very dysfunctional. The mother is very subservient to the father. The father is very subservient to his father, who we come to find was an incredibly hard and abusive and callous man. The sister is not that bright, so she's sort of subservient to everybody else. And the brother-in-law just wants to fit in. The sister's husband just wants to fit in, so he's subservient to the father. But Nick, the son, is kind of different than the rest of them. And although he's not what I would consider an alpha-type hero at all, because he is a little bit afraid to stand up to his own father, he still has more of a voice and more individuality. He's not really subservient to anybody, but he, I think, is so hindered by the obstacles that this family dynamic presents that he's not as effective as somebody who basically would say either, screw all of you, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do my own thing, or would just have nothing to do with them at all. Like he still cares too much about them and about hurting them to really be an effective leader in this situation. And it's like 4 against 1, more or less, or at least 3 against 1. They all kind of gang up on him, except maybe his mother. So the family dynamic plays an important part in the paranoia. It also, I think, speaks to a certain kind of cosmic horror. Again, when we talked about the idea of individuality, no one in this family has ever embraced or emphasized the idea of thinking for yourself, living for yourself, going out and doing the things that make you happy or that define you as an individual. All the family dynamic suggests, and it's reinforced over and over and over again, that you are not. The father says when one of the characters dies, the father says, "Well, wars have casualties. That's what happens." When another character dies, well, it was probably just that person's time. So even death is minimized. Even the impact, the pain of family members dying, parents and children dying, people that you love dying, even that is minimized because it's not about the individual, it's about the whole. Finally, I think perhaps the most specific cosmic horror element of this movie is the entity itself. Okay? To explain what it looks like is a little tough, and as it should be, because in cosmic horror, one of the ideas is that we're dealing with something so foreign that either we can't completely see it, or we can't completely understand the big picture of it, or that we don't recognize it for what it is until it's too late. And that's the case here. We have something that has figured out that it can harness electricity, and it can go through the television to communicate. Now, if you think about it too, the television, again, much like the other symbols in this movie, the television is often cited as a source for dumbing down America, a source for swaying the people to do what some nebulous group of people wants them to do. That if you want to control the people, you control what they see on the television. So again, the television is very much a conduit of control, of controlling the minds of the masses. And this creature embraces that. It uses that. It is a series of things that look like cables and bundles and bundles of cables. In fact, one of the characters who does catch a glimpse of it says, it looks like a bunch of snakes. And it does twist these cables, these tentacles, if you will, which is also a very cosmic horror sort of physical notion, that it can use these individual cables as either individual tentacles, or it can twist them together and bunch them up to be stronger limbs, which it can and does used to physically control bodies at some point, the bodies of the dead, as it takes down members of this family. But what I find interesting about this, aside from its physical appearance, is its motivation. Now, in a lot of cosmic horror, both pre and post Lovecraft, but especially with Lovecraft, the motivation of the monster is never relevant. It's never something that people look at or really try to understand. Whereas in a lot of other horror things, the motivation of the villain is sort of crucial to understanding, the horror of the story. A lot of times in cosmic horror, just the fact that it exists is awful enough. In modern cosmic horror, how people react to its existence is, a step past that. But I've noticed that a few of the cosmic horror movies I've seen lately are addressing not just that, but what the motivation of this cosmic entity is. Now, you'd think that would contradict the notion that here's something so foreign and alien and indifferent to us that we are horrified that we cannot relate to it. And that's true. That is the premise behind the idea of the boogeyman. That it is something that we can't understand, we can't reason with it, and so how do we fight it? But there's also something fascinating, I think, about cosmic horror, which looks at, even if it's vague, and even if we don't understand all of it, the whole big picture of it, that the suggestion that there is a big picture, that it does have a reason, can be a kind of cosmic horror that's also very scary. This entity has godlike powers. In fact, it tries to convince them at one point that it is a god. An elder god. And it says, worship me. Worship me or face your own extinction. It's not oblivious or indifferent. We come to find that it needs their devotion. It wants their worship. It uses its multiple tentacles as eyes. It has multiple hearts. And I think one of the reasons why why the director, reinforces the only relatable animal aspects of this creature are eyes and hearts, is because eyes and hearts are, eyes are the window to the soul, and hearts we have always associated with emotion. So here we have something that is not indifferent. It is not oblivious. It does try to undermine their free thought. It makes them paranoid, which is taken to an extreme, a form of insanity. Cosmic horror uses insanity a lot, because it is a reflection of the psychological. It tries to deconstruct these people, but maybe it needs subsumation. It wants them to be part of it. It is, again, that cosmic horror aspect of evolution. What happens when humanity goes beyond humanity? Now, a lot of cosmic horror finds this idea abhorrent and terrifying, because what is beyond humanity in a lot of these cases is something so unrecognizable to the things that we love and hold dear about humanity, that we cease to be human in any way. The other thing that this entity actually says to them outside of the television is, join with me. Become me. Which, again, we've talked about The Thing in prior episodes of Cosmic Shenanigans, how one of the motivations possibly attributed to the alien is this idea that it just wants to share. It just wants to propagate by melding with other races and absorbing their experience, absorbing their essence, and thereby growing and becoming more, evolving. And that's what this thing seems to want to do. It wants them to love it. It wants them to become it. There are certain passages, even in Christian religions, which say that we become one with God. that ultimately we all go back to the power that created us. But what that means, again, is that you are not an individual anymore. You are losing your sense of identity and your sense of autonomy. And I think for a lot of people, that is one of the true horrors of cosmic horror, is that you cease to be significant as an individual. And I think that's one of the terrifying things about this. Now, again, I said that there are spoilers. You do, throughout the course of the movie, come to realize that this force is not terrorism. It is not the government. It is not some kind of psychological torture experiment to see if you can get people to, turn on each other. What it is an entity that has taken over the world, because we see, we at the end, it pans back to show you that this substance, this creature, is not just surrounding their house. It's surrounding all houses, all streets. There are fires, there are explosions, there are things all over that are showing that the presence of this substance, this entity, is taking over everything. It is absorbing and consuming everything in its quest to be loved, in its quest to be worshipped, and its quest to join with another and take it over completely. It is an obsessive love, in a way. And there's something kind of terrifying about this idea that a god, because a lot of the tenets of a Christian religion is that God created you, and he made you in his image. There's not a lot of individuality in a lot of religions. There's not a lot of focus on you being you, and you being special and powerful and capable on your own. That you need to rely on a higher power to that, and through you, the higher power can work, great things. And I think that is the issue a lot of people have with these organized religions, is this complete dispensing of individuality, which, especially nowadays, we so very much cling to as our source, our reason to be. Our identity factors so much play into our sense of self and our sense of worth, that without them, we don't quite know what to do with ourselves. We don't quite recognize our worth any other way. It is not about our roles to other people, it's about our roles to ourselves. And while I think that, not to be too philosophical, while I think that happiness is probably a happy medium somewhere in between, I think that cosmic horror, especially cosmic horror movies like this, reinforce that idea that, in a family, you are something to someone else. You are a role that you play in relation to another person, and I think that's emphasized with many other, de-individualization symbolism in this particular movie. But I think the true horror of it is the idea that, in my opinion, long before this creature could destroy them, they tried to destroy themselves. Long before this creature could absorb their love and their attention and their complete devotion, they were already giving it up. They were already giving up anything that made them truly unique. And one of the final scenes of the movie is this entity trying to talk to the baby, the pregnant woman's baby, who has been released, for lack of a better way to say it, from the cage of her mother. And the television is saying, love me, worship me, and is trying to train this baby from the beginning that it is not an individual. It is an extension, a tentacle, if you will, of this entity. And I think the true horror sets in when you realize that people do this to each other all the time. People raise children that way all the time. That that individual child is not important except for the greater cause. And I think that to me is the impact that this movie has. So that's await further instructions. As I said, it's worth checking out. It's probably not everybody's cup of tea. I know some people are not, they're really not feeling this movie, but that's what I got out of it as far as cosmic horror goes. That's why I think it is a significant contribution to the cosmic horror movie canon. You know, I'm always out there looking for new cosmic horror movies, video games, books, the whole 9 yards to bring to you on Cosmic Shenanigans. If you enjoy Cosmic Shenanigans, you might also enjoy another show that I co-host, The Horror Show with Brian Keene. Both The Horror Show and Cosmic Shenanigans are available on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and all other platforms, basically, via the Project Entertainment Network. They're free. They're always free. A special thanks to engineer Dave Thomas, who is now back. He'd had some health issues, and now he has returned. So you can contribute to helping Dave take care of some of the medical bills that he has. There is a GoFundMe, and I'm gonna actually break the third wall here and ask Dave. Can you give me the link to that?
It's a GoFundMe, and then it's Help Dave Thomas.
Help Dave Thomas.
And
so
when you see a picture on the thing, it's ice bat and a cup of beer. That's me.
That's Dave. So please, I really hope that you'll consider contributing, because we love Dave. He is a valuable member on both shows, and we need him to be healthy and strong and to be able to take care of himself. So if you can contribute, anything you can contribute, if you could share it on social media, whatever you can do to help, we would really appreciate it. That's all for this week. Next week I will be at Scares, so there won't be a show, but there will hopefully be goodies the week following that of course, cosmic horror proportions. So thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Every person's story has something to teach us. How others view life, how obstacles are overcome, how joy is felt, how fears are faced, how love is expressed. The Matters of Faith podcast explores individual stories of people's lives and how faith plays a part. It may not be your story, but it may help shape yours.
The Matters of Faith podcast with Jay Wilburn is on Project Entertainment Network.